The year is 1879. It has been a turbulent decade in the American West. During the past 10 years, the U.S. Army has fought Native American tribes into submission. The Cheyenne, the Nez Perce, the Lakota Sioux and other tribes have been forced off their ancestral homelands to make way for white settlers. They are now restricted to reservations. In the early 1800s, the Ute Indians had met the Americans with friendship. After centuries of peaceful coexistence and trade with the Spanish and Mexicans, the Utes look forward to new alliances. But miners and settlers had been arriving in great numbers and strength, demanding more and more of the Utes' precious land. The Utes are retreating higher into the mountains, which have always protected them. But these intruders prove stronger than the mountains. O'Ray, a Ute chief, sees a frightening future for his people.
We shall fall as the leaves of the trees when winter comes, and the lands we have roamed for countless generations will be given up to the miner and the plowshare, and we shall be buried out of sight.
The Utes defend their land and way of life with an unexpected fury. And the people of Colorado finally have an excuse to enforce the often quoted headline in Denver newspapers: "The Utes must go." To all mankind, mountains hold mystery and magic. High places speak to us of majesty and power. The formidable Rocky Mountains are no exception. Here the air is thin, the summers brief, and the winters hard. The first Europeans to see this country call it inhospitable and impassable. But to the Ute Indians, this land they call the Shining Mountains is home.
For the Utes, the mountains were good lands. Everything they needed was here. There was something sacred in these mountains for the Utes.
Roaming on foot through rugged terrain, the Utes survive where others cannot. They live a meager existence, subsisting on roots, berries, fish, and rabbits. But they learn to love the alpine meadows, deep canyons, the towering peaks, and fight other tribes tenaciously to keep them.
When they met an enemy, either the enemy would be dead or the Ute would be dead. There was no two ways about it.
The year is 1650. The Utes acquire a fabulous creature. An animal that will become the very symbol of their culture.
The horse transformed the Utes into a confident, powerful, perhaps even arrogant people who commanded their homeland, became superb hunters, superb warriors, superb horsemen. In every way, the horse made the Utes a different people.
So you were able to travel great distances, and because of that, you were powerful. Our people's word for power is buah. And you had that.
Because of the horse, the Utes expand their tribal lands, controlling more than 225,000 square miles in the Central Rockies. For the next 200 years, the Utes prosper. Then a seemingly insignificant discovery in their shining mountains throws a dark shadow over the tribe. (1858). Prospectors discover gold in the foothills of the Rockies. To cries of Pike's Peak or bust, 50,000 people rush west. They name the land Colorado, a Spanish word meaning red. Towns like Central City and Denver spring up practically overnight. Gold seekers come because of printed stories about vast lands filled with rich minerals. One such writer is Bayard Taylor.
One thing is for certain, the mines of Colorado are among the richest in the world. These peaks, packed as they are with deep, rich veins, are not yet half explored. Colorado alone ought to furnish the amount of the national debt within the next century.
You're seeing someone there chipping away, drilling holes in your Mother Earth. Mother Earth that is providing your well-being, providing you food, the roots that are there in the Mother Earth. And here you are, someone damaging that and leaving holes in the earth and scraping the earth. Sure, it's going to make you angry.
November 29th, 1864. The attitude of Coloradans toward Indians is made abundantly clear on the plains southeast of Denver. A volunteer force of Indian fighters, led by Colonel John Shivington, attacks a village of peaceful Cheyennes on Sand Creek. 200 Cheyennes, mostly women and children, are slaughtered and mutilated. Shivington and his men are cheered in Denver as conquering heroes. The Sand Creek Massacre sends a clear message to the Utes and other tribes in the West.
That Coloradoans in Denver and elsewhere applauded the Sand Creek Massacre is in itself a very revealing symbol of what the attitudes of Coloradans were toward Indians. Sand Creek dramatizes what was going to happen to the Utes because of white attitudes toward Indians.
An emerging leader among the Utes is determined to protect his people from a similar fate. His name is O'Ray. Photographer William H. Jackson remembers him this way.
Of all the Indians I have known, O'Ray was quite the most extraordinary. O'Ray was a lover of peace, and his career was unblemished by a single instance of violence against the whites.
As a boy in Taos, New Mexico, O'Ray had watched Spanish, Mexican, and Indian cultures work and trade together. He knows his people can do the same with the Americans. O'Ray believes that in time, the Utes will learn the white man's ways and settle on farms and ranches. He also knows if his people don't accommodate the Americans, they will be overrun.
They had gone back to Washington, and he seen the powers that the government had, that they were so numerous that sometimes it even seemed they were more numerous than a buffalo. And so he knew what he was up against.
1868. The forward-thinking O'Ray pushes the U.S. government into treaty talks. A skillful negotiator, O'Ray helps craft a treaty that determines the boundaries of Ute lands. It is called the most generous bestowal of rights ever granted by the United States to a minority group. The Treaty of 1868 gives the Utes forever 16 million acres of Colorado land, or 4,500 acres for each Ute man, woman, and child, plus annuities of food and money. The ink isn't dry before the howls of protest from Colorado citizens begin. One of the angriest voices belongs to Territorial Governor Edward McCook.
1/3 of the territory of Colorado is turned over to the Utes, who will not work and will not let others work. This great and rich country is set aside for the exclusive use of savages.
(1869). Just 1 year after the U.S. signs the treaty, silver is discovered in the San Juan Mountains of southern Colorado, the very heart of Ute lands. Frenzied miners ignore the treaty and invade the San Juans. O'Ray demands justice.
The government is bound to protect us. We have all the time seen white men coming upon our reservation. We desire the government to live up to its treaty and remove these people who do not belong on our reservation.
Faced with a choice between giving up more land or possible war with the U.S., the Utes yield to government pressure to negotiate a new treaty. In 1873, O'Ray convinces the Utes to cede the mineral-rich San Juans. 4 million additional acres of Ute land now become part of Colorado. A resigned O'Ray admits defeat.
The agreement an Indian makes to a United States treaty is like the agreement a buffalo makes with the hunters when pierced with arrows. All he can do is lie down and give in.
But some Utes aren't ready to give in. With their vast horse herds, they retreat even deeper into the shining mountains. It is these Utes who are about to become unwilling subjects in an experiment that will lead to disaster. March 18th, 1878. A man who will have a tremendous impact on all Utes is appointed Indian agent for the White River Band. He is 61-year-old Nathan Meeker.
Nathan Meeker was an elderly eccentric. I'd even call him a nut. Nathan Meeker was a utopian dreamer.
Meeker's dream is to cure all of society's ills by designing a utopian agriculturally based community. Just 8 years earlier, in 1869, he had the opportunity to see his dream come to fruition. With the financial backing of New York Daily Tribune magnate Horace Greeley, Meeker and 200 other hopeful Easterners headed west to the plains of northern Colorado. There, they had established Union Colony, a community that bears the name of Greeley. The optimistic Meeker wrote,
"Refined society and all the advantages of an old country will be secured in a few years. A model will be presented for settling the remainder of the vast territory of our country."
But Meeker's agrarian experiment had proved to be a dismal failure, and he was fired as director of the colony. Shattered, depressed, and in debt, Meeker sought one last chance to prove his social theories and convince the government to hire him as Ute Indian agent.
So he comes to the White River Valley to try out and to build and create and become successful at this utopian ideal. This may be the last chance in his life that he can do this, and this is why he comes.
May 1878. Nathan Meeker, his wife Arvilla, and daughter Josie arrive at the remote White River Agency to begin civilizing the Indians. But the White River Band is the most independent of all Utes. They respect, but owe no allegiance to array of the Uncompahgre Utes. Living in the vast isolation of northwest Colorado, they are less inclined to farm than southern bands, and often ride their horses off the reservation to hunt in the mountains. Meeker is determined to transform the White River Utes from hunters into farmers.
"I shall propose to cut every Indian to the bare starvation point if he will not work. They are a people who are without ambition because the government feeds and clothes them."
I think Meeker was a very arrogant person, and he thought that his way was better than what my people could ever accomplish. And so that was the first mistake he made, was that thinking that we had nothing of value within our culture.
One of Meeker's first steps is to move the White River Agency site from the mountains to the open ranges of Powell Park, the Utes' best pony pasture land. Meeker sees it as prime farmland. Nagagat, a Ute war leader, objects.
He told me that we must all move down to the new site, and I answered him, "You better wait a little before doing this, as we want to understand the reason for moving." Then the agent told me that we had better all move down below, and that if we did not, we should be obliged to, for they had soldiers.
The White River Utes reluctantly move to the new agency site, but they are in no hurry to become the farmers of Meeker's imagination. Agency workers plow up some of the pasture land. Some Utes do try their hand at planting, but Nagagat and most of the others leave the agency and continue to hunt in the mountains. Summer, 1879. Forest fires, most of which are caused by lightning, rage throughout the Rockies. Colorado Governor Frederick Pitkin and his protege, newspaper editor William Vickers, are violently anti-Indian. They accuse the Utes of purposely setting the fires. It's part of a propaganda campaign aimed at removing all the Utes from Colorado and relocating them to Indian territory, the future state of Oklahoma. William Vickers.
The Utes are exceedingly disagreeable neighbors. They have a disgusting habit of ranging all over the state, stealing horses, killing off the game, and carelessly firing forests in the dry summer season, whereby thousands of acres of fine timber are totally ruined.
Vickers in the newspaper industry had headlines across his newspaper that said the Utes must go. And it became a battle cry throughout the state of Colorado that we had to drive the Utes out. That this was our land for the taking, and it was time we took it and shoved the Utes out.
August 1879. At the White River Agency, Nathan Meeker's dream of utopia is crumbling, along with his patience. The Utes who will not farm spend much of their time betting on horse races. Meeker begins to see horses as the enemy.
It seems to me evident that the greatest obstacle to civilizing the majority of these Indians is their ownership of horses. I should like to take away their horses, then give the word that if they would not work, they should have no rations.
Meeker wanted to dismount the Utes. And for 3 centuries, the strength and the pride of the Utes had been in their mounted condition and in their ponies that gave them that mobility and that strength and that pride.
Meeker forces the issue by ordering the Utes racetrack plowed under for a wheat field.
You've got an individual coming along and wanting them to be farmers. The heck with the horses. But the Indian people loved their horses. It was a part of them.
Plowing stops when a furious Ute shoots at the worker. Determined as ever, Meeker visits Ute leaders to offer a solution to the problem of too many horses. Chief Quinquet describes the conversation.
The agent told me that we should not have so many horses because they were eating up all the grass, and that we better kill a part of our horses and only save a few so as to save the grass.
The more demanding Meeker got, then the more I think they thought, is this the way our life is going to be from now on? And steps had to be taken where they were trying to ensure that their way of life would continue as before.
Canala, a proud Ute owner of some 300 ponies, is particularly upset. He confronts Meeker and is told by the agent that he should kill off most of his herd. The enraged Ute grabs Meeker and throws him against a hitching rail outside his cabin. Shaken, frightened, and angry, Meeker wires Governor Pitkin.
On Monday, I was assaulted in my own home by a leading chief and injured badly. Life of self, family, and employees not safe. Want protection immediately.
I think that Meeker had been using the military as a threat for so long that he felt that the Utes would believe the threat. He felt that if he called in the U.S. military, the Utes would just back off and nothing would happen.
September 21st, 1879. At Fort Steele in southern Wyoming, Major Thomas Thornburg receives a startling wire from his commander. You will move with a sufficient number of troops to the White River Agency. The Utes' long tradition of peace with the U.S. government is about to come to a tragic end. September 26, 1879. A force of 178 men, under the command of Major Thomas Thornburg, heads toward the White River Agency to provide protection for Nathan Meeker. They are met by 5 Utes, among them the war chief, Nagaget.
I told him I never expected to see the soldiers here. I told him we were all under one government and that we were brothers. And why had they come? The officer told me that even brothers quarreled.
Nagaget knows soldiers well. Just 3 years earlier, after Custer's defeat at the Little Bighorn, he had served as scout for General George Crook in the campaign to punish the Lakota Sioux.
And he recognized Thornburg as a lieutenant under General Crook. So he knew that Thornburg was fully capable of doing exactly the same things that Crook and Custer and many of the other military people had done in the past too. He pleaded with Thornburg not to go on, but Thornburg did.
As Thornburg's troops approached the White River Agency, the Utes fear the worst: removal to the Indian Territory, or even death at the hands of the soldiers.
The soldiers only represented war to them, only represented more domination.
They warned them, but they were ready. They weren't going to back off, and they didn't. And the warning was for them: stop, because we're going to fight you.
And the boundary of the reservation was their line. If you cross the line, it's war.
The line is Milk Creek. The soldiers cross it the morning of September 29th, 1879. Nagaget and 100 Ute warriors watch the line of troops from a ridge above the creek.
This, of course, did frighten my people, but it was to the point where either we continue living this way or we don't live at all.
The soldiers have no cover and are easy targets. They are in an open field, cut off from their supply wagons. U.S. Scout Grafton Lowry describes the first moments of the fight.
Well, the battle grew more furious as the Indians concentrated and kept up a galling, deadly fire. Major Thornburg received about 2 shots to the head, which killed him instantly, and he fell to the ground like a corpse. Groans of the dying and the agonizing cries of the wounded told fearful havoc was being made.
They did their ceremonies before they went to battle. And they say that if you do your ceremonies, that the bullets or arrows or whatever is coming at you will not be able to find your mark. That day they did prepare themselves, and the bullets and that the soldiers were firing could not find their mark, is what I'm told. And whereas the Utes found their mark and did kill soldiers.
Thornburg's soldiers fear they may share the fate of Custer and the 7th Cavalry. For 6 horrific days, they are pinned down amidst a hail of Ute gunfire. 12 soldiers have been killed. 43 are wounded.
The Utes had full opportunity, militarily, to eradicate that full troop. They could have done it, and for some reason didn't. They backed off.
October 5th, 1879. The Utes back off because of the arrival of Colonel Wesley Merritt and 800 soldiers. At the same time, a runner arrives with a message to the Ute warriors from Chief O'Ray.
You are hereby requested and commanded to cease hostilities against the whites, injuring no innocent persons or any others farther than to protect your own lives, as anything farther will ultimately end in disaster to all parties.
Nagaget and the White River warriors escape into the surrounding hills. Colonel Merritt's concern now shifts to the safety of Nathan Meeker and the others at the agency. Merritt hurries to White River, where he comes upon a chilling scene.
The view which greeted their anxious gaze was not one to be forgotten. White River gurgled quietly on, and seemed the only living object left. There was not even a breeze stirring to blow the tops of the trees. Everything was dead.
9 agency employees lie dead. Among them is the mutilated body of Nathan Meeker.
This was the man that talked down to him for years. This was the man that threatened them. This was a man that kept their rations away from them and would starve them if he could to bring them to a level that he wanted and that he could manipulate. This was a man that they had come to loathe. Well, history has it that he had a stake driven into his mouth, and I can only say that that probably was something done to give a message that says that we're going to close this mouth forever.
Chief Quinquet, the war leader Nagaget, and the other White River Utes flee to the safety of Grand Mesa. They have taken with them as hostage Meeker's wife Arvilla and daughter Josie. Also abducted is the wife and 2 small children of a slain agency worker.
It was reality unfolding at the moment. In the American mind, and certainly in the Colorado mind, any women who fell under the power of Indians were going to be raped. And therefore, citizens visualized these women captives being raped.
The army is paralyzed. The soldiers cannot pursue the Utes, as that could endanger the hostages. It takes a former agent of the Utes, Charles Adams, and a representative from Ouray to defuse the situation. Adams boldly enters the White River's camp and sees Josie Meeker and the other captives apparently unharmed. He recalls his conversation with Josie.
When I first met Miss Meeker, I asked her whether they had offered any indignities to her person. She made the offhand remark, "Oh no, Mr. Adams, nothing of that kind."
October 21st, 1879. The White Rivers surrendered the hostages to Adams, but do so only after Ouray threatens to join U.S. soldiers in attacking them. The White River Utes have been reduced to a wandering, desperate people who are at the mercy of the United States government. But Colorado's anti-Indian forces are not about to let them go unpunished. All Utes, not just the White Rivers, must pay a heavy price. November 1879. The Denver newspapers are calling it the Meeker Massacre. The citizens of Colorado now push for extermination of not just the White River Band, but all Utes. Governor Frederick Pitkin.
It will be impossible for the Indians and whites to live in peace hereafter. This attack had no provocation, and the whites now understand that they are liable to be attacked in any part of the state where Indians happen to be in sufficient force. My idea is that unless removed by the government, they must necessarily be exterminated.
As the Indian-hating frenzy explodes, there is shocking news. Arvilla Meeker, Josie Meeker, and Flora Price, the women held hostage by the Utes, change their stories. All 3 now say they were raped by the Indians.
What my people told me is that these women were not harmed in any way, but later on they also themselves at first said that they had been treated very well, and then later on changed the story. And I have to believe that the reason why they changed their story was because they were told that this was a way to get rid of the Indian people out of Colorado.
Those visions of what those women were enduring led Coloradoans to demand an immediate evacuation of Colorado by all Utes, and gave them the political muscle to bring that about.
This was the excuse they needed. This was the fuel they needed to make that big, big move of the Utes must go.
Once again, Coloradans set their sights on the mineral-rich lands of the Utes. Weary and sick, Ouray again tries to defend his people. But this time, even his diplomatic skills cannot save them. June 1880. The U.S. government pressures all the Utes, not just those involved in the Meeker incident, into signing a treaty that takes away most of their Colorado land. Southern bands are forced to accept a small plot in southwestern Colorado. The White Rivers and O'Reilly's band, the Uncompahgres, share an even worse fate. They are forced to move to an arid piece of land in Utah, banished forever from the Shining Mountains.
When I hear those stories about my people having to leave their homelands, where their souls and hearts and their skeletons are buried, a whole nation that lived there and laughed and danced and did their ceremonies, to be able to fully realize how they felt leaving their homelands. I just don't think that any of us can imagine that. But to be asked to leave, and not only to be asked to leave, but to be escorted by soldiers and told never to return again. So this is very difficult for me at this time, even though I've never lived in Colorado, but just to imagine the things and the thoughts that went through my people's minds. And I think many of our hearts, my grandparents' hearts were broken when they had to leave their beautiful homelands.
There is one Ute who does not make the heartbreaking journey. Chief O'Reilly always vowed he would never leave the Shining Mountains. On August 24th, 1880, stricken with kidney disease and distraught by his people's loss of their homeland, O'Reilly dies at age 47. He is buried in the lands he spent his life trying to keep for the Utes.
He probably felt like that he failed, but I can tell you that he kept him off as long as he could. He prolonged this whole thing. You know, he did say that he was never going to leave the Shining Mountains alive, and he didn't.
The Utah land is harsh and dry. Many Utes die of starvation. Those who survive thank their ancestors who for generations learned about strength, fortitude, and endurance in a place of wild and dangerous beauty. A place that shaped them. A place they will always carry in their hearts. The Shining Mountains. Today, former Ute lands on the western slope of Colorado are gardens rich with fields and orchards.
The wealth of the resources here is tremendous. The development potential here has been tremendous. And primarily now our economic base is agriculture. It is what Nathan Meeker, in a sense, pushed for.
Many of the miners are gone, but a new type of gold is pulled from the Colorado mountains today. Tourism is a multi-million-dollar-a-year industry in lands once roamed by the Utes. The White River and Uncompahgre Utes still live on the reservation they were banished to in the Utah desert. Here they continue to fight for their rights and freedoms as a sovereign people. In 1993, the Utes were dealt a crushing blow when the Supreme Court ruled that the tribe would not have jurisdiction over the non-Indian lands on their reservation. But the Utes continued to fight tenaciously for their rights. Some even hope to return one day to Colorado.
And that thou will bless this monument, that it will stand as a beacon for our people.
In October 1993, the people of Meeker, Colorado, welcomed the Utes, who wished to dedicate a monument to those warriors killed at the Battle of Milk Creek. 114 years after the battle, the wounds are still fresh.
And with sad hearts, Heavenly Father, we come here to Meeker, Colorado. But with glad hearts we will leave here, having put this monument here to rest and our people to rest.
Many Utes believe that the spirits of their ancestors will not rest until they are back on their traditional lands. The people of the Shining Mountains want to come home.
I believe that's where they ought to be and where they should be. I believe those treaties should have held, and that the Shining Mountains was still the land of the Utes.